right, guys, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm on a different device than usual. My camera's not working on my other computer, so I haven't used my tablet. So I'm trying to just kind of figure everything out real quick as we get started. Okay, I think we're good to go. Just do that. All right. So this week, kind of going to be a direct build on what we talked about with identity, like athlete identity and that kind of stuff. I want to touch on self-talk today. And it's really going to be more of a reflective on your end, a reflective night of like, what kind of self-talk do I have? So let's kind of start from where self-talk comes from. Where do we learn the things that we tell ourselves? Well, a lot of it is from what we've been told by others, by parents, coaches, teammates, whoever it might be. And so we all, 99.5% of the population on Earth has like this inner monologue. We have this conversation with ourselves or this dialogue going on in our head constantly throughout the day. Starts in the morning when we wake up, continues all throughout the day. There's rarely a time where we don't have some kind of conversation or dialogue going on in our head. And most of that is related to what is going on currently, what we're doing right now, what just happened, what we're going to do next, that kind of stuff. So when we talk about self-talk in terms of athletics and baseball specifically, our self-talk focuses on what are the things that we say about ourselves, pre-game, in the middle of a game, post-game, during practice, all the things that we do on the baseball field. What are the things that we say to ourselves? So I just want you to take a minute as we kind of introduce this topic, and I want you to think about games this past week. I know some of y'all played today. What do you remember saying to yourself after at-bats, after a defensive inning, when you made a play, you didn't make a play, if you pitched, if you threw well, you didn't throw well? What are the things that you tell yourself? A lot of times we're not even aware. We have this monologue or this self-talk, and we don't even know that we're having it, or we are kind of aware of it, but we don't consciously log like what it is. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. It just kind of depends. So I'm going to give you a minute. I'll be quiet for 30 seconds or so, and I want you to think like, what were the things that I said to myself today, or what are the things that I normally say to myself when I'm playing the game, when I'm if I have a good game or a bad game, what is it I say to myself? So I'm going to give you some time to think about that. All right. I'll give anyone the opportunity to kind of share what they came up with, if anybody wants to. Okay. Go ahead, George.
I think a lot of times I don't really think that much, but most of the time after something happens, I just like cuss or I swear. And just, I usually try to flush whatever happens.
Okay. Would you say that there's let me figure out how to ask this question. Like cussing in and of itself isn't necessarily a negative thing. Do you feel like it's done in kind of a negative way, like a demeaning way, or done in a way of just releasing frustration?
It's more just like releasing frustration. It's not like it's towards myself or anything, but I think it's just like expressing my emotions.
Okay. Anyone else? Maybe somebody has something that you say to yourself before something happens. Maybe going, in the on-deck circle or in between pitches, before you throw a pitch, something like that. Does anyone have anything like that? we talk about, like, why do we have self-talk? Why do we have this running dialogue? A lot of it is because our brain, when we're awake, doesn't shut down. It doesn't slow down. George, you say you don't think a lot. You do. It's just a matter of whether you're aware of what you're thinking. A lot of times, like, there's the saying of, like, turn your brain off. Well, that's not possible. You can't turn your brain off, because if you did, you'd die. But I think what most people think of that is to try to slow themselves down instead of turning things off. Like, we can't not think. Our brain is constantly going. But what we can do is try to manipulate or control, I guess, what we think and where our attention is. And that's really kind of the role of self-talk. This dialogue allows our brain to be directed towards something, because our brain doesn't do well with without direction. It doesn't do well when it doesn't have something to think about or something to act towards. So our internal dialogue gives us a way to do that. It gives us a way to direct our brain towards something. So this can be really good, but it also can be really bad, because if we're not an active controller, we're not consciously aware about where our self-talk goes, it can often lead our brain into a self-defeating direction. And that's where a lot of us go. That's kind of human nature. I'll ask you, there's good examples of this. The vast majority of dreams that people remember are nightmares. We all dream every night. Everybody dreams. Everybody has dreams. Whether you remember them or not is a different story. But the majority of the ones that we remember are nightmares. They're bad dreams, because that's typically the way that our brain wants to go. For whatever reason, with human nature, our brain wants to direct toward negative outcomes or negativity for whatever reason, without conditioning or training it to go in more of a proper direction. So without acknowledging or without paying attention to where your self-talk is, more often than not, it's going to move into a negative direction. It's going to move into a defeating direction. And so what we want to do is be able to control that to either one of two things. There's two goals with this. Either to acknowledge that we will have negative self-talk and then try to remove the power from that. Just because I think I've said this before, just because you say to yourself that you suck doesn't mean you have to believe it. I know that's kind of a weird way to think of that. But that's one example of it. So one way is we can just acknowledge that we will have negative self-talk and then just kind of move beyond it. Or another way is to consciously be aware and consciously control the things that we say to ourselves. And we can do that through a lot of different ways. We can do it through keywords. We can do it through our self-affirmations, these kind of affirmative statements that we can say to ourselves. We can do it through kind of controlling where our thoughts go toward our preparation or whatever it might be. So what I want you to work on tonight, and what we'll kind of talk about tonight, is how can we acknowledge, or how can we understand what our self-talk is doing, and then build a plan to try to move it into a positive direction. So the first piece of this is just understanding that we have self-talk and learning how to be aware of the things that you say to yourself. And the easiest way to do that is through journaling, through reflection. Today's a good day of it for you. Those of you that played today, it would be good at some point tonight before you go to sleep, if you haven't done it already, to kind of go back and think back through the game. Think back through your performance. If you didn't play today, go back through the rest of the weekend. Like, how did my at-bats go? If I had a good at-bat, what was my mindset going into it? What did I do to prepare going into that at-bat? Starting, 3 batters away, then in the hole, then in the on-deck circle, so on and so forth. If you had a bad at-bat, like, what was that like? Did you notice something different? If you had a rough weekend, like, what was your preparation going into the weekend? And then getting into, well, what were the things that I was saying to myself in between innings? If I just struck out, what was the first thing that came to my head as I was walking to the dugout? Being aware of those things can help us to go down those two paths, either acknowledge and move on, or try to do more directed control of what is it that we say to ourselves. So starting out, the easiest way to start this is with your cues that you have for all the things that you do. You all have cues at the plate, cues on the mound, cues in the field. You have things that you've been taught to direct your attention toward. And it might be a physical sensation. It might be a situational thing. There's a lot of different things that you could have. But the first piece is understanding what those are and focusing on, all right, how do I implement those into my pre-pitch, post-pitch routines? How do I implement those into the things that I do 100 times in a game, right? And that can be 95% of what your self-talk focuses on, is understanding what my situational responsibility is, understanding what my cue is for this thing, what am I looking for first pitch, what cue do I have to get the feel I want for my swing or my mechanics, things like that. Writing those down instead of just relying on, I'll know how to do this in the moment. Writing them down and making it an active process can really help with that. We talked a little bit about routines, but routines are how we kind of construct this, how we create this organization and create this way to develop this mindset. So building it into your pregame routine or your pre-pitch routine. Okay, what are those keywords? What are those phrases? What are the things that you know that you need to focus on? So that's kind of step one. That's the most straightforward way to do this. Step two is to create more of kind of a global cue for yourself. There's a really great video, and I'll put this in the group me chat. There's a video that came out. I think it came out last year, but it was when the Rams won the Super Bowl, and there was a video of Aaron Donald. If you're not a football fan, Aaron Donald's probably the greatest defensive lineman that's ever played. He just retired this year. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's like a 9-time All-Pro or something insane. One of the greatest players that's ever played. And there was a video. He was mic'd up for the Super Bowl a few years when they played whoever it was. They played the Bengals, I think it was. He was mic'd up for that game, and there was a clip of him getting out to the field. I'm assuming it was the first drive of the game or the first series of the game. I don't exactly know. But it had him, he was just talking to himself, and it showed like what his cues and what his affirmation statements were as this guy who is the best at his position, one of the best that's ever done it, the things that he's saying to himself. And I think the message that comes across with that is this guy is the best player at his position, or at least he was that year. He was the most dominant player at his position that year and for most of his career. And he is utilizing these things that a lot of people won't do because they think it's corny or they get embarrassed by it or they think it's not necessary. Like some people will think, well, I shouldn't have to tell myself these things. I should just be able to do it, which is an unrealistic expectation. It's a weird thing that comes out of athletes in general and sports of like, to be a good player, you should be like this. You should be confident. You should, have belief in yourself. And not everyone does. Even the best in the world go through bouts of disbelief. They go through bouts of negative self-talk. They may consistently have negative self-talk. But what the best in the world do is they learn how to manage it, and they learn how to either combat it by altering that self-talk into more positive things, or they understand that maybe it's not as powerful as we like to think, and they learn how to almost ignore it if they don't need it. So your decision is one of those two routes. Do you want to be someone, or do you need more positive self-talk? Do you need those messages to be constructive in nature, directive in nature, to tell you what you need to do? Or are you more of a player who can have those thoughts but almost ignore them? You can push them out of your mind and continue on doing what you need to do, despite maybe thinking that you suck or dog cussing yourself for missing a ground ball or something like that. It's rare that players are able to do that. That's usually more of a trained methodology of, guys have tried or athletes have tried to change their self-talk and they just can't do it. They realize that like their natural state is to be critical of themselves and almost derogatory toward themselves. But they learn that, okay, I know this is going to happen, but it doesn't have to mean anything. It doesn't have to lead anywhere. So your task is to figure out which way do you go? Which way do you need to be? And then constructing your kind of plan around that. So I'll ask, and you guys throw anything out that you think makes sense. And Graham, great first name. I seen here, can't use your microphone, so just type anything out. I can relay it if it's good. But I want you to think like, what are some things that I can tell myself, or what are some of the ways that I can direct my self-talk into a more constructive nature? Is it something where I need to be more positive in terms of the words that I use? Do I need to be more instructional and just focus on the things that I need to do in order to be successful? Or do I need to pump myself up a little bit? So if you have any ideas or if you have any questions about that, let me know. But if you have some things that have worked for you, I'd love for anybody to share. Go ahead, Keller.
Well, I think, like, I like to tell myself, like, I can do things. Like, maybe my brain's thinking I can't, but, like, I know I can. So telling myself I got it and, like, I can do this, I think helps me out. Like, in all sports, too. Like, because I think it helps me for golf, too, when I'm stepping up to hit a shot. Like, being confident about what I can do and hitting a good shot, say.
How do you trust yourself? Like, how do you convince yourself that you actually can? I think a lot of us would say, yeah, I mean, I can tell myself that, but I may not believe it. How do you get yourself to believe it?
I never really thought of that, honestly.
Is it just inherent that, like, because you said my brain may think that I can't do it, but I can tell myself that I can. So how do you kind of resolve that? Because you've got two competing voices there.
Well, I think, like, just the confidence of knowing I can do something helps me out more than thinking I can't.
Okay. What do you think leads to that confidence?
Knowing that, like, I've done something like that before, like in baseball, being confident in fielding ground balls, knowing that maybe one error the play before is not like me, and that I know I can make it the play.
Good. Drawing on experience. That's a good way to do that. Thank you, Keller. Graham writes in visualization with the affirmations to show what you want, prepare your mind for. Visualization's a really good tool for that. And Keller, maybe you do that a little bit without even thinking about it, or maybe it is an active thing. We'll talk about visualization next week and how to use that. But visualization is imagery, like picturing in your mind you doing something successfully. Any other examples from anybody? Or maybe if you've struggled with it, like what has your struggle felt like, or what does it look like? I'll tell it's not about me, but it's about a teammate. So I had a teammate in college. His name was Ben. Really good pitcher, but I'm sure you guys have known some of these. All he could do on the baseball field was pitch. He was a terrible athlete in general. He couldn't run. He couldn't hit. He couldn't field a ground ball, anything. All he could do was throw a baseball over the plate effectively. And so when it came to, like, playing defense, pitcher's fielding practice, he was horrific at it. And I remember talking to him. We were the same year, so we played summer ball together. We got to be pretty close. And I remember talking to him during our junior year on a road trip. We were rooming together at a hotel and just kind of talking before a game the next day. And I asked him, I was like, how is it that you're so good at this one thing, but you can't, like, if he's not pitching a ball, he can't make a throw to first base. He threw away more bunt attempts than I think I've ever seen any player do over a 4-year span. And he said this thing, and it kind of resonated with me. He was like, every time the ball's at me, all I can think about is, where is this ball going to go? Like, that's all he could think to himself, is he knew it wasn't going to go to the first baseman. All he could think is, where is it going to go? And it was a miracle, like it was luck if he actually happened to throw it to the fielder. So he never picked off. He's kind of like, I don't know if you guys remember John Lester when he was with the Cubs, years ago, never picked to first base because he could not throw to first base. If he fielded the ball, he would throw his glove and the ball to first base rather than try to throw a baseball overhand to a bag. And it's just this mental thing. And that speaks to kind of the connection between the things that we tell ourselves and the outcomes out of that. He told himself, my teammate Ben told himself, or the first thing that came to his mind was, this ball's going to go anywhere but first baseman. Where is it going to go? The doubt there, the questioning of where is this going to go? And then it affirmed that through the way that he threw the ball. He chucked it all over the yard. So teams figured that out, and they would just bunt on him all day because it was tough to hit off of him. He was a good pitcher, threw hard, had good breaking stuff. but college guys can get bunts down. So they just bunted against him relentlessly. And if he had to field it, it was a 2-base error minimum. So that's another example, just a quick, anecdote of how this mindset can creep in and how it can be so powerful if it's not dealt with early enough. Now, he didn't realize how to do this, and he never figured it out in his 4 years of playing college baseball. He was a terrible fielder every single year. And it hurt himself and it hurt the team quite a bit because he could never figure this out. So you guys that maybe struggle with this, you struggle with, throwing across a diamond, or, when you get to 2 strikes, you have this thought in your mind or this set of, okay, I'm out. Like, how do you get past that? And so what we want to do tonight is to try to help build a plan. So again, drawing on past experiences, if you have them, positive past experiences, figuring out cues that will help you direct your mind into what you want to do rather than what you don't want to do, right? We did the pink elephant exercise last week, the week before, whatever it was. Whatever you think of, even if you think of don't do something, your brain's going to go to that thing that you're saying don't do, because your brain doesn't know how to work in a negative mindset. It doesn't know how to not do things. So thinking of, like, what can I do to create an attacking, active mindset rather than kind of a passive defensive mindset? What can I tell myself? So building that, figuring out what those cues are, what those affirmative statements are. And it's not just doing it in the moment, okay? Because like I asked with Keller, you can tell yourself all day till you're blue in the face, I can do this, I've got this. But if you don't believe it because you're just now trying to say it, then it doesn't really do anything. So you've got to figure out, how can I create this belief in myself to do that as well? And that starts with telling yourself these things every day when you get a chance. I ask you guys to write down your goals and put them somewhere. Something you can do with that is write down these affirming statements that you have. Whatever these affirmations are, the cues are, write them down where you're going to see them constantly so you can remind yourself to tell yourself these things. The more you say it, the more likely it is that you're going to believe it, right? If you just do it in the moment without any practice with it, then who knows if it's going to work or not. So you got to kind of build up your arsenal and build up your rapport with whatever this cue is. Does anyone else have ideas about how to build kind of a positive self-talk routine, or a routine, maybe not even positive, but a routine that's going to help you be successful? Maybe that's a better way to put it. And if you have no idea, this is the time to ask questions. Like if this is something that you really struggle with, this is a good chance to ask questions, and I can be a little bit more directive with what I'm saying. I'm keeping it fairly general now for everybody, but if you have anything specific, let me know. All right. Well, that's your task for this week. Okay, so we're building into these things. We started with goal setting. How have you set your goals? Did you do that? If you haven't yet, you need to, because fall's probably only 5 or 6 more weeks, if that. So you don't have a ton of time left in terms of like this structured setting. You've obviously got over the winter to get ready for spring, but set your goals. Make sure your goals are somewhere where you'll see them consistently. We've talked about building your identity. And again, self-talk goes into that. Like, your identity is built off of the things that you tell yourself, especially when you hit adversity. What are you telling yourself when things aren't going well? Can you be constructive? Can you maintain confidence? Can you maintain positive self-affect or positive self-image when things aren't going well? When you're in an 0 for 15 slump, or you've had 2 hits in the last month, whatever the case may be with that. Can you continue to do that? Can you build your identity in a way where you are who you want to be? And self-talk plays a really big role in that. So throughout the rest of this fall, it's on you to do this. Reflect on what it is that you say to yourself. Try to be aware of it. Acknowledge and recognize the things that you're telling yourself. And then once you can get that stuff down, then you can start to control it a little bit better. Now you know all right, this is where my mind needs to be. These are the things I need to say to myself in order to get myself in a position to be successful. So keep working with that. I'm going to keep harping on it. Journal, okay? Your brain as an adolescent isn't to the point where you're going to remember a lot of things. You're going to remember the highly emotional things more than anything. And more than likely, your highly emotional moments are moments of frustration and anger because you didn't do well. Right? Think about how all the times that you're like ecstatic on a baseball field. It's probably not that often. How often are you angry on a baseball field? Probably more often. Your brain as a teenager is wired to remember emotional things most and easiest. So your brain is more likely going to encode those angry moments, those frustrating moments, because they're going to be more frequent. Even if you're doing well, you still might have those moments of frustration. And if you're doing well, it's likely that you're not ecstatic about doing well. You're probably content. You may be happy, but you're not experiencing that high of highs. So you're not encoding those things the same way, more than likely. Some of you might be. So journaling, reflecting is a good way to understand what just happened and actually remember the things that happened so you can utilize and take that information and use it to be better next time and use it to your advantage next time. So I'm going to keep encouraging that. If y'all have any questions about that, how to structure it, let me know. I'm happy to kind of walk you through what that can look like. I'll say this again, and I said this a lot or a bit over the summer. I don't know that I've said it this fall, but these skills are the same as any skill that you need on the field, right? You can't go out and expect to hit 400 without practicing. You can't expect to do well on the mound without throwing bullpens, right? You can't expect to just do these things when you show up on game day without putting in the effort to build the skills for yourself. And every elite athlete will tell you that these skills that we're talking about are the difference makers between them being good versus elite. And for some of you, it's going to be the difference of being your average self and your top end self, whatever that is for you. So build these things, utilize them, practice them as much as you can, keep them in mind. And the easiest way to do that is to think about them frequently, right? We only have these meetings once a week. I'm not there with you guys on the weekends, so you only see me one time. Okay, I'm not sure how much the coaches are going over this stuff or reminding you, but this is on you. Take your development into your own hands and try to set yourself up and set goals around these things that we're doing as well, around your mental skills training. Do you guys have any questions? Do you have any journal prompts, how we should structure our journal? I do. And honestly, Graham, the easiest way, they don't have to necessarily be tightly structured. It's just starting off reflecting on what happened. And if you're a hitter, go through each of your at-bats. If you're a pitcher, go through as many of the innings or batters that you faced as you can, right? Reflect on those. And the easiest way to do that is post-game, right after they happen. But even if you're coming back, like you probably remember quite a bit about what happened. 2 days later, you might not. So try to do it each night. Focus on like what happened and then evaluate your mental processes with those, which is the harder part to do. That might be the part that you don't remember as much. But try to evaluate like where was my focus? Where was my attention? What did I say to myself? Right? And what I'll do is I'll put together maybe a Google Doc of questions or something like that, an Excel sheet of questions that I'll post in the GroupMe chat with just some prompting questions for your journals. I did that last year, and I've forgotten to do that, honestly, this year. Just hasn't come across my head. So I'll put that in the GroupMe chat tonight or tomorrow, probably tomorrow, and get some of those questions in for you for practice and then for games as well. Any other questions? All right, guys. Appreciate the time. Have a good week, and good luck this weekend, and I'll see y'all next Monday.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys. And again, if you have any questions through the week, feel free to reach out to me.